Today I'm going to walk you through a chocolate recipe by a very popular French chef. I'll also translate the recipe for you into English and thoroughly test it so you can enjoy it too. Hello, I'm Chef Zach Townsend with Dallas Chocolate Classes in Dallas, Texas. I started my career in chocolate many years ago in France, and I am also the French to English translator of 18 cookbooks published worldwide. For many years, I have worked with French chefs and their recipes and follow many of them on YouTube or TV. This is my new video series where I will introduce you to a well-known French chef and his or her chocolate recipe. I'll also walk you through the video of that recipe so that we can discuss together the tips, techniques, and ingredients, and I will also provide you a fully translated and tested version of the recipe. This video features French chef Hervé Palmieri. He's been a French YouTube sensation for quite a while, and he's also an author. I found most of his chocolate recipes very easy and delicious, and most of them actually do work when you translate and test them. He's also known for substituting a typical ingredient that you find in cakes such as eggs, sugar, and butter with a healthier ingredient, such as a vegetable that cannot be detected. In this video, he makes a moist and delicious chocolate cake that is dairy-free. He also uses cooked carrots to add moistness and sweetness. And if you're not a fan of carrots or think that this might be carrot cake, don't worry about that. You actually cannot detect the carrots at all. All right, so let's go through the ingredients for the recipe. Here we have chocolate. He uses a 60% cacao chocolate that he mentions, and I will go over the chocolate more in detail here in just a second. We have 3 eggs, almond flour, cake flour. Now he doesn't mention specifically what flour he uses. I chose cake flour because it's got a lower protein content, and so we can get a little bit more of a tender cake, so I suggest cake flour in the recipe. We have baking powder, vanilla sugar. Now vanilla sugar you can get in stores, you can get online. Most often we have vanilla extract, so I replaced the vanilla sugar with vanilla extract in the recipe, knowing that it would be a more common ingredient for people. We have oil. Now oil, the recommendation here is a neutral flavored oil, such as safflower oil, canola oil, etc. And one of the reasons is you don't want to necessarily taste the oil in this cake in particular, but also he uses the oil for the glossy chocolate topping at the end. So that definitely does not need a strong flavored oil, so just choose something that's neutral in flavor. We also have 2 carrots. The 2 carrots are going to be cooked. I did give you a specific weight for those carrots prior to cooking them, and that's going to be 200 grams. And then we have dark brown sugar. Dark brown sugar adds moisture, it adds a lot of deep flavor. I preferred the dark brown sugar, even though you could use organic cane sugar if you prefer. The chocolate that you see is Valrhona brand, and Valrhona can be recognized by its distinct oval shape. Now, Hervé mentions that he uses what's called in French a chocolat pàtissier. Chocolat pàtissier just means supermarket chocolate, a basic dark chocolate, for instance. And Valrhona, however, is not chocolat pàtissier. Valrhona is actually what's called a couverture chocolate. And couverture chocolates are premium chocolates. They also contain a higher percentage of cocoa butter. Now, cocoa butter is the natural fat contained in cacao, also referred to as cacao fat. So they are premium chocolates. They are very well manufactured. Valrhona is one of the best by far, if not the best in my opinion. But you certainly do not have to use a couverture chocolate, but that is what you see in the bowl here. Now, Hervé also mentions that he's using a 60% cacao dark chocolate. So 60% cacao simply means that if you take a 100-gram bar, 60 grams of that bar is going to be the cacao content, and cacao content is going to contain everything that a cocoa bean naturally contains, which are the non-dry fat solids, in addition to the cacao fat or the cocoa butter. So the remaining percentage, the 40% in this example, because we have 100 minus 60, so that 40% then is going to be sugar. So whenever you are choosing a chocolate for your recipe, you always have to consider the ingredients in the chocolate itself and what that chocolate is contributing to your dessert. You also have to double check that if you are using what we call a dark chocolate, that it does not contain dairy. In the US, bittersweet and semi-sweet chocolate are defined the same by the FDA, and they do allow up to 12% dairy in those chocolates. So you have to double check that your chocolate does not contain dairy. Now, when it comes to fat content, you might also find sometimes palm oil or palm kernel oil. So I generally do not recommend those types of chocolates because they're just a lower quality chocolate. So for what we would call dark chocolate, my suggestion is to look for just a 2-ingredient chocolate. So basically cocoa beans and sugar. And then you have to decide on the percentage cacao that you want. And always remember that chocolate contains its own set of ingredients. So you have to look on the back of the chocolate to ensure you know what ingredients you are adding into your dessert. So continuing with the recipe, here Hervé is explaining that the carrots are going to be cooked prior to using them in the batter, and I gave you in the recipe a very simple way to do that. You just simply steam them. And if you are concerned, by the way, about this recipe tasting like carrots or being able to taste the carrots in the recipe, you don't have to worry about that because the flavor of the carrots will actually disappear. Hervé explains that this is what he's actually using to act as a substitute for the butter by providing the sweetness and moisture content and softness that the butter would otherwise contribute. One unique thing I want to point out too about this recipe is that it's actually, as you can see, made in a blender. So you do not need an electric mixer for this. So everything comes together really easily just simply by using a blender. And most of us do have a blender. Not everybody has an electric mixer. So now you see that he is cracking the eggs into the blender. There is a suggestion here I have, and that is not necessarily to do it this way because it's very easy for eggshells to fall down into your mixture. So I really recommend that you measure them outside of the blender first. Now, when it comes to measurements of eggs and measurement of all ingredients, it's really best to use weights, and in particular, gram weights. And the weight of a average large chicken egg is 50 grams outside of the shell. So what you need to do, the best practice, is simply to put a bowl on a scale, crack the 2 eggs into the bowl, set to gram weights, and then get the gram weight total. That is going to be a lot more consistent for you, and good baking practices are about being accurate and consistent. So now he is putting in the oil. He leaves some of the oil out. He sets it aside because he's going to mix it in with the melted chocolate in order to create the glossy chocolate topping. However, I like to be a little bit more accurate than that, so I actually measured out the exact amount of oil and exact amount of chocolate that you would need in order to make the glossy chocolate topping. All right, so now he's blending it, and it's really important at this point to make sure that you get this fully blended because the carrots really need to be broken down into a very fine puree. So make sure that you do blend that until it's completely smooth and has no sign of any kind of chunks of carrots left or anything like that. Now the brown sugar goes in, and he's now adding the vanilla sugar, and this is where you would add the vanilla extract. So he's blending that as well. Now it's time to melt the chocolate. So I do want to make one point about the chocolate here regarding how I handled it in the recipe. He is going to melt the chocolate at the end of the recipe after he has already blended the majority of the ingredients. However, I found that it's best to actually move that step to the beginning of the recipe. And the reason is, whenever you are going to melt your chocolate, it's very easy to overheat it. So by melting the chocolate at the beginning of the recipe instead, it gives you the opportunity, or gives the chocolate an opportunity to cool before you add it to the rest of the ingredients. All right, so he is using the microwave to melt the chocolate. One thing about using the microwave, it's perfectly fine, first of all, to do that, but you have to be very careful not to overheat the chocolate because the microwave is the one place where you could potentially burn the chocolate. So my suggestion is to start with about 30 seconds in the microwave, take the chocolate out, stir it, go back into the microwave, maybe another 15 or 20 seconds, take it out again, stir it. Just remember that chocolate needs to be stirred in order to melt properly. So the microwave is perfectly fine. A glass bowl can heat up a lot faster than say a microwave safe plastic bowl if you want to go in that direction. And of course, you can also just use a double boiler or a water bath to melt the chocolate instead. All right, so here's where he's adding the chocolate quantity into the oil. Make sure that you do mix that very well together. Like I said, I did provide specific amounts of oil and chocolate that's melted in order to make the glossy topping. So the chocolate gets poured into the blender, and you are going to blend that very well as well. The batter then gets poured into a separate bowl, and now he's going to start putting in the dry ingredients. He's sifting the flour here, and that's always best practice, because if you sift the flour, that will ensure that you don't have any lumps. Plus, it allows the flour to integrate better into the batter whenever the particles are separated like this. I recommended in my translated version that you also put the flour in two portions. That way it's just easier to integrate rather than just putting it in all at once. Here you see he's also putting in the baking powder. He's sifting that as well. And then, of course, now he's sprinkling in the almond flour. You're not going to be able to put the almond flour through the sifter, so it's going to be a lot easier to just sprinkle it in. All right, so when you mix the batter, you'll see that it's a little lumpy because of the almond flour. Now here he's sprinkling in fleur-de-sel sea salt. So he goes on to explain that he likes to add fleur-de-sel and at the end just a touch of salt to provide a little hit of chocolate whenever someone is enjoying a slice of the cake. As I mentioned before, I like to be a little bit more specific, so I did calculate the amount of salt that I liked for the recipe, and I gave you a specific amount of salt to add. But you can do this at the end too if you want to. You can sprinkle in a little additional large flaked sea salt in order to provide that additional hit of salt. All right, so now it's time for the pan. Now the pan size that he chooses in his recipe is an 18 centimeter or 7-inch pan. So I tested it with the 8-inch pan, and then which is 20 centimeters, and then also the 7-inch or 18 centimeter pan. I found that in the way that he mentions in the video that the 7-inch pan is actually a better pan to go because the cake will be higher. So I did prefer that height as well. Now he doesn't mention it in the video, but you should prep the pan. And so spray the pan with nonstick spray, place down a piece of parchment paper, and then spray the parchment paper and the sides of the pan as well to prevent any sticking. So I did add that step, even though I don't think you see it in his video. I did add that step to the recipe for you. So now you just smooth out the batter. All right, so the cake goes into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius. You wait for the cake to cool a little bit. Once you take it out, you can then also run a knife between the cake and the pan to help release the cake easily from the pan. Then you invert it onto your serving platter, and you can wait for it to cool down for a few more minutes before applying the glossy topping. Here he is applying the topping, as you see, to the cake. Now I do want to make a comment about oil and chocolate again together as a mixture. That is a very common thing to see, is mixing a little bit of oil with melted chocolate. And that's very common to see whenever used for a glaze over a cake. And what the oil would do is help keep the chocolate from setting back fully to its original firmness. So it keeps it soft and it allows you to slice through the cake more easily. The glaze after about 12 hours will dull a little bit, and then also if you happen to overheat the chocolate, or if you overheated the chocolate and oil mixture, you may see a little bit of gray blotching developing on the top of the cake. If that happens, you can just mask it with a little bit of cocoa powder or powdered sugar, or you can also just wait until an hour or two prior to serving the cake, and then apply the glossy topping at that point. You could also make the topping ahead of time and then just store it. It can be stored at room temperature, covered in plastic wrap, or stored in the refrigerator. And then you would simply just heat it back up to get it back to its fluid state. So there you have it. It really is a moist and delicious cake. It's a unique cake in terms of how it's made, and of course it's very easy. You will find the fully translated and edited version of the recipe in the link in the description, so be sure to check that out. And also let me know through comments what you think about this video series idea, and then also anything about the recipe as you try it. If you've got additional questions you want to ask me. So I do hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.